Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to Aquarius Rising Africa. Good morning, evening, afternoon, wherever in the beautiful world you are. Hope you're having an amazing week so far. And we are very happy to have Simone Anderson back with us again this week. We're moving as we go along through her Epstein research, which is super, super duper interesting. And yeah, but before we bring Simone on, I want to just go through this week's schedule with you guys. Yay. Okay, so today is Tuesday. It's just after 6 o'clock, and Simone is with me. So stay tuned for that. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, please. And then, of course, tomorrow, Double Trouble with Jesse. Look forward to that. Again, Thursday, my Mirror Universe series. So join me for that as well as we understand the patterns, our own inner patterns, and how we've protected ourselves and how we recognize it and see it and how it plays out in the world around us as well. So join me for that. And then Dennis Carroll again Thursday night. We're going to be chatting with him. And then, of course, drop in with Shanti. We're doing the South Africa series from settlement to current crisis. And I'm just connecting a whole lot of dots as we go along the way, just seeing how this great big masterful web of deception is absolutely being spun, and we are living through it right now. And of course, then, yes, on Saturday, Jerry Marzinski joined me for that, our favorite mental health care specialist expert on schizophrenia. And for those of you watching Jerry's shows, he speaks about schizophrenia not being hallucinations, but rather entities that have attached through trauma, and is most certainly we are able to change that, contrary to what the medical mafia says. And then, of course, for members and Patreons, members of Solutions, as well as ARA, book club with Jesse on Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock Central Africa time. And then, of course, Sunday Loop, which is where we play reruns. We do the reruns of older shows from the beginning, as well as those shows that we haven't aired yet. So join us for that. Well, hello, everybody, in all of the chat-tats. Charmaine, Lisa D, Monet, Colleen, nice to see everybody and welcome. So without any further ado, Madame Simone,
Hello.
welcome back. How are you?
Oh, I'm really good. Just in Southern California right now. This last weekend, I was able to attend an event in the Pacific Palisades. You guys heard about the big fires in Los Angeles several years ago, right?
Yeah.
So I was up there at the fire scene, and we took the testimony of a lot of people who lost their house in the fire. So it was very emotional. But again, our government is putting up every obstacle for them to rebuild their homes. And I think there's been 17 out of 8,500 people that have actually been able to rebuild. So we're going through in California. During our last two governors, they took illegal loans from the Chinese government, and they defaulted on them. If Hillary Clinton had won office, the Chinese would have invaded the west coast of the United States. There's an open plan being led by our governor to leave the United States and become one with China. And that would include Hawaii, Oregon, and Washington and British Columbia. And that is called Cascadia, if you would like to look that up. But our governor is openly putting it on the ballot to withdraw from the Union, which is a treasonous act and an act of sedition. So like I've talked to you before, our state is under fire by not only our own internal government, but by the Communist Party.
Wow. We were actually discussing off air this whole communism thing and how it's absolutely crept in. But I don't want to digress right now because we can absolutely digress with that into 1,000 segues, that's for sure. But it's very interesting what is happening at the moment worldwide, globally. And you know what is, I'm a great believer. I honestly believe that, you know, these times we are given, well, third dimensions, the dimension of free will and choice, although it doesn't feel that way, right? But we are given choices every single moment of our lives, basically, right? So all of this is about choices we make and which direction, because I do feel there's a splitting. We're gonna, you know, we're enabled. I guess, you know, that's what people say, heaven or hell, right? But I think it's not one event. It's a continuous event, actually. We making choices every single day of our lives based on what we know, right? On about our own spiritual selves, about, I want to say religion, but I say that with hesitation because organized religion, in my opinion, is the worst thing that ever happened on this planet because it's exactly the thing that has divided and conquered us. But I don't want to say religion is bad. I want to say believers, obviously, you believe what you believe. And I think it's amazing for everyone, whether you call it spirituality or belief or religion. I think whatever works for you, as long as it's non-judgmental and we're allowing others to be who they are. We need to, you know, and as long as you're not hurting anyone, that's of course goes without saying. Well, maybe it should be said in this day, you know, right? But yeah, it's very interesting times. It's super interesting. And I always say, as hectic as what it is, it's a beautiful time to be alive, man. Look at the stuff we're living through. Look at the deceptions we are here to navigate. I mean, look at the bullshit they're throwing at us, and look how we just cutting our way through it. That's the way I see this. I really do. I
Well, the
think
word
there's
religion itself literally means to like reanimate, recreate something that was old. And who was the legion? Those were the demons that Jesus cast out of the So
you see,
religion. And when you go to church, church means Kirk, right? If everyone's saying, oh, Charlie Kirk, right? Well, Kirk means church. But if you go back to what Kirk means in ancient Egyptian and these that they follow, Kirk means Circe. And Circe was a demon witch who would lure people into her house. She would steal their minds and then she would consume them. So this is where we're going when they close the church doors and we see people being brainwashed in religion. And this kind of leads into what I've been talking about over the last few months with you. And before we get started on Epstein today, as you know, I've been studying the Quran and Islam, and I've come to understand that it is very, very similar to communism. And in fact, countries like Iran worked with the socialists and communists to overthrow the government and put the mullahs in charge. And then the mullahs turned around and killed everybody because that helped them get into power because they believed them to be disloyal and couldn't understand if they could turn on their own countrymen, what they would be if they allowed them in their country. And you, last time we were online together, you would advise me to go back and watch the Lily Road series. And so this is one of the things that I've been still studying every day, and I sent some pictures over to Shanti. And what I began to understand is that Islam and have very similar belief systems. And if you watch the series with Rhodes, and you saw the serpent energy about how, like, Muhammad originally thought he was possessed by jinn. In jinn, a lot of people just think that's demons, but it actually, in Arabic, it means the entire unseen world. And so as we frequently see that.
Simone, I just want to, if you don't mind, I want to just clarify for some of the viewers where this comes from, because not everybody has watched that. Beverly Rhodes is, for those of you who don't know, is also, I've done many interviews with her on this channel, as well as on Solutions. She's a very gifted psychic, but also spent many years in South Africa being handled by one of the descendants of Cecil John Rhodes. So she has done, and she would, so this particular screenshot that Simone is showing us here is from one of the shows with Beverly. And Simone is drawing a comparison with one of what we're going to show you now. Sorry to interject there. I just wanted to make that clear. Otherwise, it gets confusing for people.
Yeah, of course. Well, so as I was watching this, I believe that part of when we lost our connection to God, and I always believed this before I saw this image of what she was explaining of what vampires are and what possession is. And as you can see, that looks like the head of a serpent. There at the hands are the eyes and the mouth and the hand. And then we frequently, from the Kaaba to different Islamic flags, we always see this half moon image with the star. And so this literally is an image, as Beverly has explained, of what is happening before a demonic or vampire entity takes over the human condition, right? And there's predominantly a lot of these people living in France, according to her, and vampirism somehow began in France. And if you understand the contracts that are being done with these dark entities, then maybe it helps you understand that why it's in France. You know, why is there such anger and hatred and animosity and communism in China? What entity do the leaders of China have their contracts with? So this, to me, truly explains, for instance, the Vatican's has their room where the Pope speaks from the mouth of the serpent. It has the same image that they're using in the structure of the building. And if you see these 4 dots, and apparently this is the state that this demon will be in right before he comes to take over a group of people or an area, according to what Beverly explained, right? And then you see the head, it's almost like a serpent head with the pointed ears. And they have all these, you know, the Leviathan, right, will rise from the sea, right? But who on earth is the sea? The Holy See is the Vatican, right? The structure that owns the Vatican, and the system that controls the Vatican system is known as the Holy See. And I've already established in a previous video with you guys who the Whore of Babylon and who the Whore of Babylon system is being implemented by. So again, as I began to research the Islamic faith, and also what happens at the end when Jesus comes back to Damascus, he submits the whole world to Islam because it's the true faith. And then he joins with the believers, and he goes to an area outside Jerusalem and battles the Antichrist. But the Antichrist of the Islam is Jesus, because Jesus comes back in the area around Jerusalem to Mount Olive. So this is an Antichrist system. We know slavery, incest, pedophilia, warring. There's nothing in Muhammad's life story that says he's a prophet. In fact, everything that he teaches and does is exactly opposite of, although he says that the Torah and the Bible are at least Jesus's testimony, were the truth, right? So you can't have, if the Torah and the Bible are true, then the Quran is false, right? Because Muhammad himself says those books are true, and Muhammad never read the Bible because he couldn't read, and he was mostly exposed to Gnostics and cults around the original Christian religion. So what I wanted to point out is that Islam and this communist movement are what's driving a lot of what's going on in the world today, because they're believe that they are in the final battle, and now they're infiltrating the infidels' countries, and they have the right to enslave us, rob us, rape us, take our children, etc., under their law, because we're infidels. And if anyone doesn't think that's true, why don't they call the relatives of the 1.5 million Barbary Coast ships that were robbed, and over 1.5 million European white people were sold into slavery in Arab and African countries. So slavery has worked in both areas, and actually it's the Islamic faith that not only heavily supported the slavery prior to Christianity, after Christianity, and to this day. One of the first things that happens when Islamic people take over an area is they take all the women and children and sell them in open slave markets. So this isn't a theory. This can be proven today. You can go back the last 20 years in any country the Islamists have taken over. They immediately enslave people, because this was what originally drew people to Muhammad. He wasn't getting a lot of converts. And so he started giving them 80% of the raids and the slave money that he generated through those raids. And all of a sudden, the religion really started to grow. So let's go to that next photo. And this is the Islamic temple that's right down the street from my house. So do we see any similarities to the vampire possession of the deep, dark entities sitting right 1/2 mile from my mother's house? And this is an Islamic institute. And you can go to the Kaaba at Mecca and you can see this same symbology. And frankly, you can see it a lot in the Catholic Church if you decide to look into it. You can see this imagery there. And again, if you want to go to the popes, yeah. So this to me has explained what the horns are. They always have all these horned gods and things like this. I think this is a better representation. We're having because we don't understand the things that a lot of people that are on your show understand. We're seeing all these things at a very, surface level and not really understands. Jesus tells us we need to understand the signs, and he tells us that in the good book, right? And so that's what you and I are doing. So we're actually, even though it may seem a little off, we're actually explaining to people what the signs are so they're able to see them, so we know what time it is.
Wow.
Do you have any mosques like this in your area? I'm going to go take some more pictures of local mosques. They've just renamed the city I grew up in, Disneyland, as Little Arabia. I literally went to an event in downtown, and they were recruiting for Hamas and Al-Qaeda right there in the streets of Anaheim, 5 minutes from Disneyland. And of course, Walt Disney himself was a Nazi. And if we look back at what happened in the Middle East, Hitler started the Aryan Brotherhood, and the Shah of Iran literally called him Shah Hitler, right? So these things go way back because they were believed to be the true Aryan race. They allowed them to come in, and then they pretended to agree with them, and then they slaughtered them all. So let's take that lesson.
How long has this plan been in the making, if you just sort of, this specific plan that you know of? I mean, gaining momentum now, right?
So are you aware of Albert Pike, the founder of the Illuminati here in the United States? And he wrote a letter that explained the 3 wars that would bring the world into the rule of Satan and under communism. So we had the First World War and the Second World War, and they panned out exactly like they said who would be fighting. And the Third World War is between the Christians, or the Muslims and the Jews and the Christians. And so this has been set out many, many years ago. This is an implementation plan of people like George Soros. It's my understanding from a show you just did with Jesse that George Soros is out. A lot of people believe he's been dead for several years. I mean, he was in his 90s, and there's, you know, they'll take out pictures and they'll put pictures up of him, and then you can do the search and see the pictures from like 5 years ago or something like that. So according to Jesse, the people that have ascended to those high levels now are Barack Obama and Oprah Winfrey. And so we can see the Temple of Solomon there, because they're coming from the African countries, and we can see marriages like Harry and Meghan. That's a Temple of Solomon and a high Scottish Rite marriage. So we can see it coming right out of our countries right now. The same things are happening all over the world.
I'm interested, since you mentioned Harry and Meghan, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that. You know, this whole royal family and Meghan Markle, where I mean, she's put it out there that she pretty much doesn't have a family, or was disowned her family, or what have you, but or her father. But it turns out she actually has siblings. She has 2 siblings and 2 parents. So it's crazy to me that has been allowed to happen, firstly, in the royal family, because it's not like that can be hidden from the royal family, right? So what is your take on what's happening there? As you say,
remember how we talked about Jeffrey Epstein just wasn't trafficking poor girls? He was trafficking the elite and the monarchies to be sex kittens, to marry the powerful men in the world and report back to the system, and also to blend their bloodlines in. But the British monarchy hasn't been the British monarchy for a long time. You know, there's always been the dispute whether Prince Harry's even really his son. If you just saw the recent activity last week where the other son, what's his name? Not Harry, but the other one, William. He kicked Kamala out of the palace and her prime residence, and now has taken over because there's a struggle from her heirs and her family trying to take the crown. I again believe that Harry probably wasn't the son. He looks just like the other guy. He's never been close to his father, and he actually spent most of his childhood at that other guy's house, like being raised by him. So, but I think there's a division in the monarchy. The reality is the city of London went bankrupt several years ago. And if you notice, the monarchy's cut all of its costs. It's cut a bunch of people out. The monarchies of Europe outside the Vatican made all of their money in the slave trade. So they don't really give a crap about the people. They're the ones perpetrating it. Again, if you look behind the scenes, it's still the city of London that's most likely funding the people in South Africa to overthrow it under communism, which is the system that the city of London, it was the feudal system. And then when that got kicked out, they had to think something new up. So they thought up communism, right? And they're like, well, you won't have to do anything. The government will provide everything for you. Well, that's what slavery was. Right? You had no free will, but your slave owner was technically providing everything you needed, living, housing. So we have to understand that the current monarchy is a joke. They were intermarried. The Rothschild family, this is well documented, married in and polluted the bloodline from Oliver Cromwell on. They murdered most of the real people who were actually blood descendants of that line. Then they had the Saxons come in, and Anglo-Saxon is the lost tribe of Isaac's son, Anglo-Saxon, Isaac's son. The Finnish people, Isa, they call their father Isa from Isaac. They speak a language that's very similar to ancient Hebrew. So these are some of the lost tribes. sometimes some of the Canaanites, and they believe that they should recapture the power. This is what's going on between the descendants of Esau and Jacob, is being fought a lot of times among the ruling bloodlines. So I think that kind of got off on a tangent. So I hope that I explained it for you guys. But Meghan Markle was pointed out on your show. She was in the to be the High Witch of Darkness, just like Jesse, with Meghan Markle, with Trudeau, with Macron, with Kate, with Beyonce, right? So it's not a mystery that these people aren't working out. And if you understand that the British Admiralty system went bankrupt a few years ago, and previous to that, in 1999, the compact we had under Admiralty law also went bankrupt. And the person who took over the postal system of the world canceled all monarchies. I personally believe that King Charles will be the last king of England, unless they put on some fraud. But technically the monarchies have been, and their money's been taken because they were really owned by the City of London. And for instance, Israel is a private crown corporation of the King of England and the City of London, just like Canada is, just like Australia is. So we're seeing these corporatocracies collapse, and these countries are open for capture. And they're hiding all of this from us, so the people who control the world can go in and try to realign a new system that closely matches the old system.
Wow.
And we did the Admiralty law where I showed you the bankruptcy and how they own our birth certificates. That was one of the first shows I did. And again, this is what Cecil Rhodes was implementing in Africa, right? After they lost control, they went back down in. It wasn't slavery this time. It was the new construct. And so what do they have the people in Africa doing right now with their money? Killing each other. So that's their plan. They'll get everybody to kill each other, and then they can come in and implement the system that everybody was supposedly fighting against.
Well, they've been doing this in Africa for the longest time, because I want to just say as well, you know, we were speaking earlier on about communism and how Africa is pretty much communist at this point, and it's been infiltrating for a long time. When the border wars were on, right, that's exactly what South Africa, the most southern tip, right, of the globe, basically, we were surrounded by obviously African countries who were being trained by Russia and Cuba. So South Africa, the only white people fighting Black Africans trained by Russians and Cubans.
Right.
And so, I mean, South Africa actually won those border wars, or so we're told. But it's crazy because we can say that communism wasn't supposed to come in or didn't come in, or we won the war against communism. Firstly, that's such a lie, because if you think about it, cheers, bye, Alan. I'll see you soon. Because if you think about it, one of my brothers was military conscription in this country was absolutely compulsory. Every young guy, when he left school, either had to first go to university, but after university to the army, or army. Most guys went to the army for 2 years. And if you didn't, you were literally arrested and locked away. I mean,
well, girls went, right? I have several girlfriends that lived here that were in the South African army that are American.
Yeah, but it wasn't compulsory for them, but for sure they were allowed. Definitely, there was a lot of women in there. But it's like that communism, we won the war against communism. But if you think about, and that's what I'm doing with my whole South Africa series at the moment, it's called The Pattern. I'm doing on a Friday afternoon, from settlement to current crisis, because South Africa is the cradle of humankind, if we think about it like that. Whereas if we believe, which I certainly, I must say, are we all 100% sure? No. But believe humanity began there. And you know what's interesting? There have been so many problems and issues there with sewage and disgusting. I mean, it's just such a sign, right, from nature and the earth of what's going on. So when we look at it like that, it's never stopped. Communism has never ever stopped.
It's just a tool of the Catholic Church.
Yes.
They used the Inquisition to control the people in Europe, right? Everyone says, "Oh, we're not in end times." Well, they call the 14th to the 18th century the medieval times. That's the middle of the evil times, right?
Yeah, right.
Translates to that.
But it's what we're saying, Africa. It's like the Catholic Church. I mean, you know, most people harp on when the Boers arrived here in 1652. And the whole narrative around South Africa is set there. And it's so not true because, I mean, the Spanish and the Portuguese were here from the 1400s already. They were the first ones that brought Catholicism, the Catholic Church, into Africa. They were not settling here or anything, but they were trading here, and they were already obviously had their little fingers in the pies here, the Portuguese and the Spanish, right? And so that's how Catholicism or the Catholic Church got in here. The Dutch and the British, I mean, the Dutch got here in the 1600s, and they brought in the Dutch Reformed Church, which is really another form of apartheid. And although the British were the architects thereof, the Dutch followed suit with that. But the Catholic Church was already entrenched. And that's exactly what you say with the communism coming in, because we all know, if you're watching this channel, you're going to know that the Catholic Church is kind of like the main hive of nastiness.
Who gave the Dutch and the Portuguese, I mean, who gave the Spanish and the Portuguese the right? We just had Queen Isabella. Remember how I was telling you that the California went bankrupt and our federal government went bankrupt and those systems failed? They literally just took the statue of Queen Isabella out of our state capital about 2 years ago, because she no longer rules us under the contracts that they established way back then. And so Queen Isabella, via the papacy, gave the right for those ships to sail across the sea, because in Admiralty Roman law, you didn't have the right to travel across the sea unless you were part of the system. And remember, when the United States left the system after the Revolutionary War, we had all of the Barbary pirates capture over 1.5 million of us, because we were no longer under the protection of the British and the French navies, right? So they, even though you think you win, they find a way to trap you back into the system.
Exactly, because it's all just one big fat web of lies, and they're all connected via that big fat hub of the center, which is the Vatican. That's the center of evil, and everything is just a tentacle off them. But it's interesting because, you know, we talk about that, the trading routes, and they were the original, as you say, slave traders and traders of everything, and they were given permission via the Vatican. Then, of course, the Dutch, Cornelius someone, I can't remember his name now as well. That's how the VOC or the DEIC started, because they were observing how well these Portuguese and the Spanish were doing with their slave trading and their spice trading. So, of course, they had to get in on the action, didn't they? And originally there were like 7, from what I understand, different big Dutch organizations, and then the government got them together. There was mayhem there. So the government forced them to join forces, which became the VOC, right? And then that's how those guys then became so powerful. And in my opinion, that was also along part of the original shadow government, if you think about it that way, because they had their own fleets, their own navies, their own governing system. And they then, I mean, that's when they came to South Africa, 1652, for 5 years, settled here and intermarried with the Khoisan people, which then birthed the Griquas, right? But within 5 years, they were setting the free burghers free, which were the Dutch farmers, which now suddenly had land, and now they needed slaves. So they were then started trading in slavery. And then a year later, they then started getting the Khoisan people off their land and their mining and stuff like that. So to me, that right there is telling you they've always had that plan for Africa. That's what I'm saying. This is not just about the history of when they got here. I'm just kind of painting that because I'm researching it now. But the deeper, darker, sinister, because they would have been experimenting on Black people long before that. You got to think about what they were doing. Of course, the Portuguese were already trading with West Africans who were, yes, selling their fellow African people, but from warring tribes that they'd captured, right? So it was...
Well,
so
and a lot of them, there was an area called Negro land, which took up a huge portion of Africa. That's why we call, actually Black is a racist statement. It was made up by white races who wanted to enslave the Black race by calling, we never called people by black, white, yellow in the past. Throughout history, we called people by their nations. We were people of different nations because, you know, like Khazaria, there was people of all different nations living there. In Rome, there was people of all different nations. And it was just in the 17th, like my sister just came in and I was saying the Dark Ages happened from like the 14th to the 18th century. I personally believe that we had a much higher society and system in the past. And during the Dark Ages, they removed all of our history. We've been in a recent reset over the last few hundred years, and they've removed our real. So people went from being hunter-gatherers, all of a sudden being able to paint Michelangelo photos. This just doesn't make sense. So I personally believe the Dark Ages occurred right in the 13th century when the Pope declared he owned every human piece of land and soul on the planet under Annum Sanctum. It started in 1122, but it came to fruition in like the late 13th century. And again, by the 14th century, you see Columbus, you see the people going down to South Africa where the slave system spread out. I believe it ascended above that in civilizations like Tartaria. You can travel all over the you can travel around California, and supposedly Father Sarah, who didn't even have a carriage, right? He just had a mule, and he supposedly built these, the Mission Trail in California, a day's walk apart. So he didn't even have a carriage, and he was enslaving the indigenous people, but somehow he built the cathedral in San Francisco that looks just like the one in Notre Dame. Right. And you can see there'll be, when you go to those ruin sites, you'll see a really old structure. And I've worked in the Middle East. I've seen all the buildings. I lived in Greece and Turkey. I've seen the old ruins. And then there'll be something new that's more like Mexican style that was supposedly built like 150 years ago. But you can see the ruins. And as you know, around the world, over all the old pagan temples, and different energetic sites like the pyramids, there's pyramids all over the United States, all over. I mean, the state of Ohio is covered in pyramids. So we didn't discover America. And I believe that we went through this great reset during a period of the last 100 years, and the real history has been removed. And so we are currently in the dark times, and we're just coming out into the end times, is my personal belief.
Oh my goodness, this is certainly the sludgy dark side. For sure.
Okay, so we're actually supposed to be talking about Epstein today. So we got off. I just am right now, the biggest thing, regardless if you're a conservative or you're a liberal, or if you're anything in between, we aren't fighting each other. We're fighting the same system that our ancestors fought. And we're fighting the same people that 500 years ago society was fighting when we had the feudal system and we saw movies like Braveheart and stuff, right? It's the same system. we're in the same system. And if you don't believe that, go to the Congo, where supposedly 10 to 20 million people have just been killed by the communists. But you know what the most popular religion there is now, and who's taking control of the government? The Vatican. So the Vatican first funded all the wars so they could kill each other. And now they put in their high priest, and they've converted everybody to Catholicism, which is not Christianity. So we're watching it right in front of us in Africa right now. You're living, unfortunately, I worry about you. I see your clips sometimes on what's going on in the streets. And then I think, but she's there for this time and space, and God put you there, and you're helping people understand what's really going on. So you're fighting the war just in your own way.
Oh yeah, it's crazy right now, I have to say, you know.
I consider myself a digital soldier.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's for sure what we are. Wow. It's interesting. It really is. Okay, but let's not digress any further. Yeah. I don't want to take you away from
Okay. Okay, well, so last time we were talking about Epstein's arrest and their unusual circumstances. I'm sure that many people who are in prison today would like to get Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer and figure out how they can get the same deal for themselves. So when Epstein was finally arrested in Florida, after being exposed, and people had been turning him in for almost 20 years, he was given time served. But he also did have to serve a little bit of time in jail, where he had a work release where he left to go home to his home office every day. So, and he was, of course, they saw him soliciting underage girls. So during his prison time, he was literally having young girls brought in to his house. And what we'll find out earlier is he was even paying extra for the cops to protect him. So, the controversial verdict released him from registering as a sex offender in some states like New Mexico. And we've covered a lot what's going on in New Mexico at the Zorro Ranch. There was baby farms and gene editing, and they were working on super soldier kind of situations and brainwashing and literally creating children in the room to be the people they wanted them to be later. Epstein had a ranch in New Mexico where he was creating his own race of people. He is known to have impregnated at least 20 women at a time. Epstein was open about his ambition, according to top scientists and academics from Harvard and other schools. And Bill Richardson, the Democratic governor of New Mexico and a prominent Democratic Party operative, was a frequent guest of Epstein. He also had a ranch in New Mexico. He was the governor of New Mexico eventually. New Mexico is a state where this type of plea Epstein had in 2008 did not require him to file as a sex offender, because he had to file as a sex offender in Florida, but the laws are different in New Mexico. Richardson had close ties to the Clintons, having been active in both presidential campaigns and the Clinton administration. And he passed away a few years ago, supposedly peacefully in his sleep. But this was another situation where he was being taken down. All of this information was coming out about what had been going on at Zorro Ranch. And to this day, the local police, the FBI have never searched Zorro Ranch, where supposedly all this activity was going on. Because as we began to understand that Jeffrey Epstein was an agent of the Pentagon and the deep state in Israel, the UK, and of course the CIA. So Bill Richardson was unofficially working as a world peacemaker, traveling to Myanmar to meet with military leaders that overthrew the last government. And again, Myanmar is one of the biggest drug trafficking and slave trafficking destinations outside China. They do a lot of the Chinese dirty work in Myanmar. So most likely that's who put the military in control there. And supposedly whenever Hillary Clinton or Bill Richardson goes somewhere to help a country, that country should be really, really scared. Myanmar is considered by the United States government to be the top in human trafficking. So that's not just my opinion. Outside China and South Sudan. And that's, there's a CNN June 2018 report by a Griffith, a woman on CNN. And that really goes into detail. Actually, CNN actually was covering the real story at that time. I'm not sure if the woman's still working there now. You can't cover real news if you work for Fox or CNN. The Clinton Foundation has been active in Myanmar since at least 2013 and 2015, when the new recently overthrown government was elected. Hillary Clinton took credit for the Democratic vote being successful, led by her when she was the head of the Obama State Department. And so they implemented the Dominion, which our president of the United States just made a public statement. There were 71 countries, and I believe your country is one of them, that the Dominion cheating system was used with the complicity of Russia, Cuba, North Korea, and China and Saudi Arabia. So this news will be coming out. I actually covered a lot of this in the past on my channel. This isn't new news. I just said to my friend who was breaking the story, I was like, it would have been so nice if someone at the State Department or the federal government went on the internet 15 years ago and just looked this stuff up, because it was out there. I found it and wrote about it 10 years ago. So anyways, it's all coming to fruition. We're going to see a lot going here in the United States. I recently had someone who exposed the voting fraud. He was a savant. He was working in an organization. He was actually a whistleblower for the mafia. He'd been living in hiding for years. He saw the algorithms. He was literally in jail, in hiding with Tina Peters, the lady who was just let out of prison from Colorado voter registration. Several days after prison, he was found dead in unusual circumstances in his home. The algorithm that the president is using today is actually his algorithm. And so his death is being currently investigated right now. But several days later, the president came out with that exact news in a speech to the nation. So that's kind of getting off. But this stuff of what I'm explaining is what started happening all over the world under this Dominion system, where all of these countries were collapsed and communists took power, is going to be something that's going to be a huge news story over this next 6 to 12 months, especially here in the United States. So the Florida government prosecutors failed to follow procedure and did not notify the defendants of the deal with Epstein. And usually in the States, when they're going to make a deal with somebody, they gather the people that were affected by the crime, the family members, if sometimes the people aren't alive anymore, and they're allowed to give feedback and also speak at the sentencing hearing. And so this was done in secret, because obviously people who had their daughters trafficked and sometimes murdered weren't okay with Jeffrey Epstein being on daytime release so he can have sex with more underage girls and, continue his devious plots to overthrow our nation. So the sentence caused public outcry from victims and observers alike. In fact, the book Filthy Rich, the first nonfiction book written by James Patterson, a resident of Palm Beach, explores the events of the first Epstein case. And probably a lot of you guys have written James Patterson books, like Along Came a Spider. He's a world-renowned, famous writer, formerly in intelligence and government operations, and he's since I was a child, he's written award-winning books. So he came out, but what was really interesting, right after he came out about this book, I believe they found something on him, because all of a sudden he was on tour with Bill Clinton and you never heard anything about his book. And I think that was just a way of showing people they can get to you if you try to tell the truth. And everybody's done something and they've got it on you, right?
Yeah. For sure.
So who knows what James Patterson did? He never wrote another book about Jeffrey Epstein and the unsolved crimes. He went back to writing fiction after that. Considering the evidence and reduction of the original charges, there was even a more interesting sentencing and punishment. Secretary Acosta, he was formerly the prosecutor of Epstein in the state of Florida. And I don't know if you remember this or if it was covered, but he had to resign in his position in the Trump administration when years later the dirty deal was exposed to the public. Acosta's defense that he was told Epstein was above his pay grade, implying that he was protected by the government. And again, who was Attorney General at that time? William Barr. And if you remember, his father was the person who hired Jeffrey Epstein to be a professor at an elite boarding school. And he also wrote a book about child sex slaves in space. Right.
It's like right there. I mean, you know, I'm just sitting here, and if there's anything that I've really started seeing lately on such a great level, it's showing us in plain sight, right? And this is a typical example of how they show us in plain sight. All we really have to do is learn how to connect the dots. We've got to speak their language. We've got to understand what their symbolism is. And we've got to see how they're working. I mean, this is crazy, you know, what you're saying. It's like, I'm like, come on. And, you know, another thing, I think with is it the maritime law, children, babies, infants are not considered human. So that is why.
Yes, it means non-human, right?
Sorry?
The word fetus, they always call babies fetus. That means non-human.
But even, yeah, like, but I mean, even the newborns, whatever, I'm not sure up until what age, but that's also one thing that one of the survivors was saying, is that that's why they do what they want with those children. And those laws do not apply to them. Laws of child abuse do not apply to them because their laws don't cover that. Their laws, basically, that's an animal.
Well, right. And the papal law, anyone exposing pedophilia is under threat of immediate death. And they did take out a few high-level cardinals here in the United States over the last few years that were trying to expose. One cardinal shot himself twice in the back of the head. So maybe once in the back of the head, but twice, come on. So this is going on. And what I've learned more about the sovereign military watching Jesse. And the sovereign military is international, right? International means it has no country. It derives its power from the corporatocracy. It has, so these people that we see and we're like, why aren't they serving our country? Aren't they serving? Because they're sovereign soldiers. They don't serve our country. They serve the system through the Knights of Malta. And if you noticed, even the Vatican during its bankruptcy sued to have all of the Knights of Malta assets seized and brought back into the Vatican because the United States government has been paying the pedophile priests pensions through the Holy See. Right. And again, the Leviathan will rise from the sea and he will have 10 heads. And that's the 10 heads of the system of the kings of the countries that are aligning with the Pope. Because when
10 rings.
Yeah. When he comes back, he will confront the 10 kings of the earth in the final battle. Right. So it gets, once you understand it, all of these things, and watching your channel has filled so many things, especially listening to Jesse and Lily, because those are things that I'm not able to find in a regular book. And I'm being led to a lot of these conclusions, but I didn't have anything to support it. So I understood the Knights of Malta and their whole system, but I didn't understand they were the founders of the sovereign military. And that's led me down a whole different path of research. And so let's get back to Epstein and his medical research, because this is something that a lot of people want to pay attention to, the child trafficking. And of course, that's terrible. I'm not taking away anything from it. But there were much deeper things going on here, from gene auditing, from organ harvesting, from all these different things that are going on. So if the court case wasn't strange enough, Epstein was financing medical research at Harvard, where he had an office, He didn't, I mean, what did he have an office at Harvard for? He's not an academic. Although a lot of people say he was stupid, like people that knew him, like Ben Menashe, who worked for him in intelligence. And then there's other people that are saying, no, he was extremely brilliant. He was a math genius when he was in school. That's how he got up to the areas that he was at, because he was extremely smart. So I don't know which one is true. All I know that I believe he is just a false personality, a creation of the intelligence agencies, right? That's what I know for sure. The other stuff I don't know. So
I'm definitely sure his face, I've always said that face is the full face. You know, it's amazing how in each and every creepy and despicable video out there, he's in it, right? I mean, and I'm not saying he wasn't a pervert. I'm pretty sure he was a despicable pervert as well. But they've made it all about him. And that's the ruse. And that's what we must realize. That's what I've been saying.
You know, he's got the Habsburg jaw. You know, you can see there's been a lot of interbreeding. And I take a close look at his gender. Ghislaine Maxwell, that's a whole other thing. We can do a gender swap show one time.
I think he was definitely, you know, because
like Ghislaine Maxwell's mother was a man, right? I'm pretty sure Ghislaine Maxwell is gender. You have to understand that if you're part of the New World Order system. I just watched a video that showed all of the movie stars that have every single movie star in Hollywood, not just one of their children, but if they have 5 children. And what's really scary is a lot of them are adopted, right? So they're all gender inverse. None of their children know what gender they are all of a sudden. So Hollywood's exposing a practice that they've been doing for 1,000 years. This practice of gender inversion, it was called the cult of Hathor during Jesus's time. So this is an ancient cult. It's what they believe. This is what is in the United Nations doctrine. The founding principle of the United Nations is to remove the male-female gender. That's the founding principle. So you have to understand the people involved in the system, especially since the Nazis did all those experiments and figured out how to operate on babies in the womb and everything, that a majority of the people in the public eye, whether they're on our side or not, are practicing this. And especially if they're open practitioners of the New World Order. So I wanted to get back on topic. Harvard, he had an office. He co-founded the Clinton Foundation, but supposedly Hillary Clinton's never met him in her public statements. Even her own lawyer made public statements that Jeffrey Epstein and the guy from Canada, Canaccord, the Uranium One guy who arranged to have the United States uranium sold to the Russian government, right? So all of these people are all connected, and they try to act like Bill Gates tries to act like Bill Gates financed Ghislaine Maxwell's sisters for programs 50 years ago. And supposedly he doesn't know that family now. I mean, they're just blatantly lying to us. And anybody who has a computer can go every time they make a speech, and they can just go Google the information and find out that, you know, they'll see newspaper articles of him with Ghislaine Maxwell, the Gates with the Maxwell family back in the 1980s. So it just complete lies. Welcome to, one of his main focuses was creating his own race. And if you look at all of these people that are so concerned about creating their own race, I mean, Bill Gates, is he really the epitome of masculinity? Like, right? Is this guy Lex Wexner the man every woman dreams of procreating as this guy? Like, no.
Those are their own experiments. They are their own experiments. I swear those guys are their own experiments, man.
Well, and it's true. They get uglier over time because they keep marrying their own relatives.
Right, exactly.
Right? You can take Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's family line back to Vlad the Impaler, because they're all related to the British family. That's how come they had access to the palace, etc. Right? That's how come all of a sudden the people that were aware of what was going on have been kicked out. And you were asking about Meghan Markle earlier. she was subpoenaed in the Epstein cases because she was a yacht girl and she was sleeping with Andrew, according to the court records, before she was with Harry. So
Yes.
why is she being subpoenaed in the court cases from 15 years ago before she was even with Harry? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I've definitely heard about her and Andrew, and it's like, I mean, it's please, as if Harry didn't know that. Again, it's not like they didn't know. I'm sorry, I don't believe for 1 second Harry wouldn't have known that.
Well, I think he may have been sold out because he's not the real son, and he's kind of been left out to Meghan Markle helped that happen. But if you understand the way they do a lot of signs and imaging, right before these people were symboling, and they do it through sports scores and rituals, and they kept signaling this one statement: the red-haired king will come to America. Who is the red-haired king? Harry. They kept signaling that, and all of a sudden Harry's living in LA. So because they had the plan to reconquer us back into the British Commonwealth, right? This is the whole plan since 1999, when our contract with the British Commonwealth went defunct. They've been fighting to bring us back into the British system. And so for me, the fight we're seeing between the monarchy and the ruling kings, I believe the monarchies have been dissolved, but they still won't go away, right? So I don't think that we're going to have to be dealing with these monarchies for much longer, and our true king will rule the earth. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Lex Wexner. And even though all of these people were associated with all of these things, the royal palaces and the state houses of every nation were still open to these people. So who is Jeffrey Epstein? Like, how does he have all this power? And why would Lex Wexner hand over the management of his fortune to Epstein? He supposedly gave him his house for $1 in Manhattan, the ranch, and handed over management of all of his money. And again, we can understand that they're in the Knights Templar system, where the system really owns all the assets, and they're just caretakers in the system of the assets. And at any time, those assets can be taken from them. And so I think that's what we saw. Lex Wexner was getting older. Jeffrey Epstein was younger. He was able to align himself with Bill Clinton because Bill Clinton was a pervert, and he was able to align himself with Prince Andrew because they were perverts. And this was really what was seen as his skill set. And there's no way he could have possibly been on all the boards and all the companies and signed all the things. He was a bag man, basically, that was just going around doing the deeds. The fact that we know who he is means he's very, very low on the totem pole.
Exactly.
So why did he put his house in Epstein's name? But Epstein was the financial mastermind and backer of modeling agencies and human trafficking worldwide. And so we're going to kind of go through and connect the modeling world. Or was he simply a con man who the intelligence agencies found useful and then disposed of, or my personal opinion, he was smuggled out and is living happily in Israel today when someone had to be sacrificed to calm the public. And very convenient for everyone involved that his death prevented many civil and criminal investigations from proceeding. In fact, the judge in the one case with Virginia Roberts, she later committed suicide down in Australia. She claimed to have been trafficked by Epstein. And the judge ordered her to destroy all of the evidence relating to the lawsuits. Now, I mean, I've never even heard of this. To destroy the evidence. I mean, the evidence.
Is that for real?
Right? Like, it almost seems like that's a crime, especially other co-conspirators. So again, the court system is owned by the Admiralty law. When you step into a courtroom in the United States, you can see the United States flag that has fringe around it. The courtroom is shaped like a Masonic hall. You've got the judge, you've got the jury, you've got the black and white floors. And so when you step into a courtroom in the United States, if you hire a lawyer, you're declaring yourself mentally incompetent and insane. You become invisible to both the jury and the judge. So the court always wins. And as you can see in these kind of cases, the system prevails. Epstein had homes in New York, Palm Beach, Paris, New Mexico, along with a fleet of jets and even a helicopter. He had passports to most nations in the world, including Saudi Arabia, who was supposedly the enemy of Israel. Apparently, when interviewed by the Daily Mail after the 2008 jail sentence, he was in the process of buying a home in Saudi Arabia. The same interview reports Epstein managed money for a few select clients. And one of the reasons Epstein might want to go to Saudi Arabia is because rape is considered the woman's fault under Sharia law. She needs 4 male witnesses to testify on her behalf, and she is frequently forced to marry her rapist to save the family's name. So, of course, he would want, when he was under gun from the Western world, whose people had turned on it and they were demanding a name, why wouldn't you want to go to an Islamic country where rape is basically legal? So the same interview reports Epstein managed money for those clients. He flew to Russia to advise Putin. I mean, the same thing that Ghislaine Maxwell's father. Why was he so high in the British government that he could fly to Russia and get information? So he would fly to Russia and he would sell information about the British and the French to the Russians. And then he would get information from the Russians and he would sell it to the British and the French. And the same situation going on later on through Epstein was doing the exact same thing. The Wall Street article forgot to mention his 2 islands in the Caribbean. One is Little St. James Island, and then there was Great St. James Island nearby. So Little St. James Island actively appeared to be winding down after the press brought the trafficking activities into the public eye. But don't worry, Epstein, while his one island was being dismantled, he was planning a new getaway on Grand St. James to improve and continue his blackmail operations. Did you know that Epstein claims he was the co-founder of the Clinton Foundation? Okay, so I want to just do a little more on the Grand St. James. Again, who was financing these islands? The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Again, the modern day human slave trade and the basis of all Western banks, from Bank of America to the Bank of England, are based on the child trafficking revenues of the Roman Empire. So, both Hillary and Bill were frequent guests on the Lolita Express, and they took them to Pedophile Island. In fact, the Obamas spent time on the island too. Frequently, they'll fly into an island like St. Bart's or one of the smaller islands, and then they'll go by boat or submarine to the island itself. The Obamas spent time on the island too, and Obama immediately went on vacation without his wife and with a bunch of men to an island right near Jeffrey Epstein's island the week after he left office. In fact, Obama spent time there, and Alan Dershowitz, who is the famous attorney, you know, he was the Clintons' attorney, and then he was Trump's attorney. And although the Clintons are denying they know Jeffrey Epstein or ever had any relationship with him, here's the direct quote from their attorney. Mr. Epstein was part of the original group that conceived the Clinton Global Initiative, which is described as a project bringing together a community of global leaders to devise and implement innovative solutions to some of the world's most pressing challenges. Focuses of this initiative include poverty. So it doesn't say focus of this initiative include preventing poverty, climate change, global health, and religious and ethnic conflicts. It focuses these initiatives to include poverty. Right. You've got to read the word, right? So they're right there what they're planning on doing in Africa, right there. Right?
Well, you know, I mean, so it again, you can see with all of this, I mean, the AIDS injection, right, or AIDS was injected. I mean, it's now become common knowledge around here that in the 80s as well, they put the AIDS virus into the smallpox vaccine. And they started up these little pop-up health clinics
Right.
all over rural Africa, ensuring people get this jab, which of course was given freely to the African governments.
Right,
And then
right.
suddenly they have, and this is what they did, suddenly then they have this outbreak of AIDS, which was intended to kill off African people. We know that, right? And then they have this outbreak of AIDS, and then suddenly the American, whatever it was, says, oh, well, we've got the antiretrovirals for you, but you have to pay for them. So they'll
Right.
give you the smallpox jab free, right? And then they'll but in the meantime, there's AIDS in the smallpox jab. And now when you're looking for a cure for AIDS, now you have to pay. And because you can't pay, hand over your resources. And
Exactly.
that's how they got mega claws into Africa. Yeah, I think 12, more than 12. I've researched that and I've done shows on that before, but I'll have to just go and check exactly how many countries had to hand over their resources.
Well, this
Bill
is the system.
Gates,
Yeah.
Bill,
This is the
Bill
Roman
Gates,
system. Yeah.
exactly, has started mining operations in Zambia. What the F?
Right.
And Zambia has got the biggest, I was there at Kalambula. It's got the biggest mining hole or whatever it is. I mean, they're not kind to the earth in Africa with these mining operations. I'll tell you that much. There's a lot of abuse on the
Yes.
earth.
Yes.
And they don't give a shit. They will leave these mining holes wide open after they leave. Animals fall in there, kids fall in there. It's like horrific. They
Yes.
leave this. I mean, it's just disgusting what they do here. They are absolute monsters. Really, they are.
And they don't really care if the people die of water poisoning or whatever. And this is, this has been a problem. They destroyed California when the city of London came, and the whole entire Sacramento River Valley was flooded because they were using hydraulic mining, and they were just blasting away entire mountains, and they were flooding all the agriculture. They were flooding all the towns below. And I was a mining person, but I strongly believe, and we've made a lot of advances that we can be applied in the mining sector. We've gone quite technological, and there are ways that we can do it with preserving. Like a lot of the water companies here in California that feed the cities today were all started by mining companies, right? Because they were diverting the water. So there are ways for people to work together and to manage their resources that were put on this earth. God gave us everything we needed here on the earth, and we need to responsibly extract it. But again, there's frequently the corruption within your own government systems of these countries that are part of the system that are being paid by the people who want to destroy the country. So it's so hard to, there's always the people in their own countries that are facilitating, for instance, the slave trade. Some people were violating their other countrymen, and then they sold them into the system, right? So there's always the internal element, that the outside element can come in, and so they see that fissure in society, and the outside element comes in and funds the bad people that would have never gotten ahead without that money. And the goal of war and the goal of death is to slowly seize all the world's assets into their pie. And that's exactly what's going on in South Africa. We just saw what happened in the Congo, and we see who's in control of the Congo today, right?
Exactly.
Supposedly.
Exactly.
And they were fighting system. They were fighting communism, but now they've embraced the system that put communism in. So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what I was saying, because where I was a teenager in the midst of these border wars, right? And I've spoken about it before as well. South Africa, white country, literally surrounded by obviously black African countries where they were being trained by Cubans and Russians to nail us. And I mean, it was horrific what, the amount of bloodshed and all of that occurred. But interesting, and I think I might have mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. Someone who's in the know that I know said, Chantal, why do you think that, the border wars ended? I said, well, the terrorists surrendered. That's what we were told, right? Namibia was finally given its independence. And he went, no ways. He said that's when the Berlin Wall came down and the money now had to go and fund something else. And this guy was very much right up there. He was an operator, like
I was based in Moscow for years, and I met a lot of people from Africa, and they knew the Russians hated them, right?
Yeah,
They just, there's a real racist tinge in the whole communist, not the Russian people themselves, but the Bolsheviks, who were an invading force that collapsed their government and then killed 7 million soldiers who came back from war, because the Russians didn't go to war to put the Bolsheviks in power. They just killed all the men who came home so nobody could fight them back. And they've been in control of that system. So we see this. They've done it everywhere, right? And you can trace it all back to the same system. The point of war is debt. And then debt is reneged on, and they seize your natural resources. Then your country has no way to ever pull your society out of the poverty in the system, and you're forced to be enslaved under the only system so they can eat. And this is
and if you don't comply, then you will have a little accident, or you will have a little heart attack, or you will fall out of a window and commit suicide or something.
Or they'll let the Islamic terrorists invade your area and all the Christians, right?
And
because that's what happened.
It's what's happening here strongly. But if you look back and we just look at where, everyone, if you've been watching my show, you'll also know the whole Nelson Mandela scam that we've been fed with, right? And Samora Machel was the Mozambican president not long before Mandela came out of jail, and he was killed in an aeroplane accident. And then fast forward a couple of years, Winnie Mandela figures out very quickly how this is not my husband. So hello. And that's also why, there's a lot of talk around why she was taken out. And I'm hearing that she and her oldest daughter, Zinzi, were both actually, and Zinzi passed away, were both actually taken out because they knew too much, and they were, Winnie Mandela was not one that was going to keep her mouth shut. But then Mandela goes on to marry Graça Machel, who was Samora Machel's wife. Yeah.
I mean, really? And then everyone's like, okay with that? Well, when I was living in communist Russia, after I was living there during Perestroika and Glasnost, and they announced that Nelson Mandela had died when I was working in Russia. So that was the early 90s. So what does it say in your history, like when you do your research?
And I definitely, I remember at some point that there was a media in the news that he had died in jail.
Yes.
But then they retracted that quickly. And then they said, no, it was fake. But I do believe, he wasn't the places they said he was. Nelson Mandela, and the real Nelson Mandela, in my opinion, died in 1985.
Okay.
And he was replaced by a Zimbabwean called Gibson Makanda, he's pretty much his doppelganger. And I guess, I don't know if he's a clone or someone very similar, but I also feel that this guy spent time in jail with Mandela, copying mannerisms. And I believe there was REM memory transferal going on. And that was because the real Nelson Mandela refused to sell his people out. He refused. He was a militant freedom fighter, and there was no ways that he was going to compromise his people because they needed the saint, right? This transformed saint to come out of jail 27 years later, right?
Right.
And when were the elections held? 27th of April, 1994, right? So there was a lot of things. And he came out 2 inches taller than what he was when he went in. Oh, for God's sake. I mean, I can hear about someone getting shorter in jail, right? But not taller.
Well, maybe they were stretching them on a rack like the British used to do, in their torture chambers. I don't know. That's the only thing I could think of.
I mean,
I just got measured at my doctor's office, and at 62, I just shrunk another half an inch. I'm now 5'6.5". I used to be 5'8" on my first driver's license.
Well, that must have been what the Mandela effect was all about. That
Right.
As you grew older. That's part of the Mandela effect as well.
Right.
But seriously, and I think that's also why, I mean, Winnie Mandela was accused of a lot of things, of the necklacing of this young black boy, this young activist, Stompy was his name, and he was necklaced, the whole necklacing with a tire. And she was apparently the one that, but from what I've been looking at now, know that she was actually accused of that, and she was fired from the ANC Women's League. She was completely turned into a persona non grata after he came out of jail, and she cottoned on to the fact that he couldn't even speak proper Xhosa, right? He was not a Xhosa. I mean, like, anyone knows, and I mean the locals, you will know, especially if you're a local, right? A local Bantu tribe, you're gonna know exactly who speaks your language and who doesn't.
Right.
I mean, how can you bring a man and that was the whole thing, out of jail, and he's not even speaking his proper original language anymore. No, man. And you know what I'm seeing, what I'm enjoying more and more, is that it's coming out now. These things are being revealed. They're coming out more and more. Yes, maybe the information has been declassified. Maybe they are speaking some nonsense interwoven with it, but truth prevails. So that's what I say.
Well, let's get back. I kind of wanted to finish up on Epstein and the poverty initiative. And I know we kind of get off on other topics. We'll just continue this report on. Indeed, Epstein and Clinton's focus on poverty must have been the perfect front for a human trafficking organization. Epstein bragged about buying girls or offering modeling contracts to girls in Eastern countries, then forcing them into his web of sexual blackmail and sex with wealthy people. The Maxwell and Clinton government connection is well documented, with the Clinton Foundation's funding Maxwell's Save the Ocean charity. Again, they deny having any relationship, but they're actually funding the charity. Hillary Clinton's State Department hired Alexander Gerasi, Ghislaine Maxwell's nephew, a recent college graduate, to be chief of staff of the Middle Eastern policy from 2009 to 2013. So we had a relative of Ghislaine Maxwell's running the Middle Eastern policy during the the Obama administration. And his responsibilities included dealing with the Arab Spring, the Friends of Libya, and Friends of the Syrian people. And look at what's happened. I think it could have been his incompetence that put the poor Middle Eastern people. Of course, they planned this, right? That's the reason they took over those countries. But putting him in charge gave the excuse that, it was just a mistake, or obviously they had someone they could control. Epstein office walls hosted pictures of the Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the Emirate Prince Mohammed bin Zayed. Prince bin Salman was arrested along with many of the Saudi royal family members in 2017. And this is part of the story I think a lot of people miss. What was going on with arrests around the world, especially in the Saudi government. And literally the king was Epstein Island purchased by Prince bin Nayef? And if so, why? Bin Nayef claims Epstein managed his money and made the purchase without his knowledge. bin Nayet claims Epstein managed his money. Like, okay, so you don't know where your money's going? I actually worked with the Saudi Crown Corporation in the past. And believe me, the men who were running the organization knew where the money was going, especially if it was going to buy an island. They had to approve. I made an offer that was only $28 million on a hotel I was on the board of directors with, and they still had to run it by the Crown Prince. So to say that he bought some island and was having it commissioned without the prince's knowledge would be pretty unusual. Saudi Arabia's King bin Salman al-Abdulaziz Al Saud was charged. He picked his successor and he named Prince Mohammed bin Salman as crown prince, and he deposed Prince Mohammed bin Nayef from the post. And this like rarely ever happened. And at 31, the country's new successor to the throne is 50 years younger than the current monarch. And this is why we've seen a lot of changes in Saudi Arabia. If you understand Donald Trump's trip to Saudi Arabia, he exposed them. They did a sword dance, which demonstrated that the Saudi military was now under the power of Donald Trump. And so that's what we've been seeing unfolding in the Middle East and the changes going on under the leadership of this new prince. Could these arrests and transfers of power have anything to do with the weapon sales and invasions of Saudi's neighbors in the Middle East? Is Epstein an arms dealer? And what intelligence agencies does he front for? Did he help arm any of America's enemies? And I think this is something that we've touched on the past. Jeffrey Epstein and the royal families of Europe have always been in the weapons and war business and the slave business. And this is how they've always generated their revenues. So there was the famous dress of Bill Clinton in the Monica Lewinsky blue dress. The picture was hanging in Epstein's New York apartment when photographed, and Epstein claims to have purchased this wall hanging from an art student at a New York exhibit. And to me, it's just a way of showing people that Clinton is under his intelligence network. I think it's more of like a statement about where Bill Clinton sits in this system. I personally believe that Hillary Clinton is much higher in the system and that she was more like Bill's handler. But Bill was just a much more likable person and much more, affable, whereas Hillary Clinton is not a person who's generally well liked by her staff or the people around her. So I think she had a lot of the things we saw under the Clinton administration were really Hillary Clinton's plans, because she goes way back. She was actually on the Watergate committee. She was originally a Republican. And she got kicked off the Watergate committee for lying and providing false evidence. And of course, the guy who accused her of that when she ran for president, that was a standing opinion for 30 some years. But then when she ran for president, they obviously blackmailed him into taking that statement out. And he recanted his statement a few years ago. But that's just, she's been in the situation, in the political situation that she's in for her whole life. And her father was a powerful player in the system. The Clintons are not the only high-level political players that have ties to Epstein and Wexner. Donald Trump was photographed with Epstein, partying and socializing. Subsequently, they had a falling out. Trump sussed down from his Mar-a-Lago resort. Trump claims Epstein tried to recruit one of his Mar-a-Lago employees' daughters into his operation. Furthermore, Trump indicates he was the only Palm Beach resident that assisted the police in the investigation. And now I've interviewed a lot of people who are trafficking victims, including some people that you've had on your channel. And they said that they were literally banned from even making, because they were trafficked into his casinos in Atlantic City. And they were threatened under punishment of death for ever contacting or associating with Donald Trump. So I'm not sure if that's true. History will end up telling us. But I'm not sure what people on your channel have told you, but I've interviewed quite a few victims who were trafficked to presidents and high levels of people on both sides of the political party, and they all like him. So I'm not sure what the truth is there. And there seems to be another Ohio connection to Epstein. Wexner and Trump via land development deals in Ohio. And if people aren't familiar, Ohio is between Chicago and New York. It's a very rich part of the United States. Again, it's covered in ancient ruins of the ancient civilizations. There's hundreds of pyramids in Ohio that have been covered by grass and by other building or covered up by the government. So that's a whole other story. Ohio has some deep connections to the occult world, I believe. So maybe that's also why they were operating in that area. Victoria Roberts, an Epstein accuser, asserts in July 2020 interview that she remembers seeing Ghislaine and Trump's first wife, Ivanka, helping Ghislaine scout young models on more than one occasion. And if you remember, Trump's daughter was a model. She was a model for one of the agencies that's now being accused of being a trafficking operation. And she's also married to Jared Kush from the line of Kush, from the line of Nimrod. So the Babylonian system that we exist in today. So let us not forget that the Obama's connection to Epstein. The White House records indicate that Epstein visited the White House at least 3 times. And not all visits are logged. And if you understand that there's underground passageways, they've even made movies about the secret passageways that go in and out. And then a majority of Washington, D.C. office buildings and stuff are underground. So even when you go to D.C. and you go between the Senate and the Congress building, especially in wintertime, you're going to travel in underground tunnels to the different buildings. So that wouldn't be a big leap to say there was tunnel systems under there. American leaders are not Epstein and Maxwell's only close buddies. And now this guy, Mahmoud Abbas, the former Israel prime minister, was a frequent house guest at Epstein's. And he was an old friend of Epstein and frequently visited him in his New York City home. And of course, these crimes are being openly exposed right now. I wrote this about 7 years ago, a lot of this reporting as a chapter in a book that I'm currently working on. So I've added a lot more to it, but I'm just trying to take people through the spider web so they can see how everything is connected. Epstein and Maxwell had connections to President Macron of France. Macron himself was an international investment banker prior to his political career. People like Candace Owens have exposed the research of 2 top French journalists that exposed Macron's wife as being his teacher, who they started having an affair when he was 14, and was also follows the history of his sex change to becoming a woman. And it's also been asserted and never been challenged that that he is also Macron's father. So she's not only married to a trans woman, that Macron is also her father. And if we understand that in France is kind of the hub of this negative energy, when we first started out those slides of showing what demonic possession is and how it actually is sucking the energy of your life from around you, we kind of see why some of these crazy things and why the leader of France and the head of the leader of the crime syndicate in France is also a convicted pedophile who is supportive of legalizing the children's right to sexual freedom, which you can go to Planned Parenthood today, or you can go to the United Nations and see their charter that basically fights for children's rights for sexual freedom. So Harvard and many other institutions accepted money from Epstein. In fact, some of these institutions were closed for several years after the COVID closed down and the bankruptcy of the international banking system on March 2020. He had an interest in genetics and living forever. He openly discussed starting his own race of children by impregnating over 20 women at a time at his New Mexico ranch. But this wide array of interest did not end there. Many observers believe he was stealing nuclear and industry technology for Israel. And if you understand what happened the day that Lindsey Graham died, who was a prominent politician in the United States, the Congress had just passed, but the Senate rejected by only a few votes to meld the military of the United States with the government of Israel and pass all of our technology advancements that are ahead of 20 years ahead of any other countries to the Israeli Mossad and the Israeli military. Okay. So they are actively trying to take over our country because the founder of Israel, Lord, forget what his name is now, Balfour, was a dyed-in-the-wool communist. And so we're seeing infiltration from Israel to Venezuela to Cuba and all these countries, because the United States is the final battle. If we can collapse the United States, communism can be implemented worldwide. So I'm kind of going to leave it there today. I think we're going on almost 2 hours, and I know these shows get long. We can take this up again on another show, and we'll just continue off where we started.
Now I can hear myself again.
Okay, I can hear you.
Absolutely. I think it's, yeah, great, because as you say, with the whole communism, the takeover, very interesting, looking at what's happening here as well. But thank you. Yes.
And I'm showing you the connection between the Israeli Mossad and the CIA and the British City of London with the Islamic movement and the implementation of modern day slavery, Islam, over society and over women predominantly, because women are the enemy of Islam. And we are just considered useless, lying, conniving. I mean, the things that Muhammad says about women, it would set the, if you look at the Islamic countries, they're the poorest countries in the world, period.
Yeah.
And although they sit on some of the richest assets, and formerly their countries were the jewels of the world, especially of Africa and Asia.
Yep. Thank you so much. And we look forward to having you back in what, 2 weeks' time?
Yeah, I put it on my calendar today when I was sending you emails. So I think that the 18th is a good, is that? Yes, the 18th. That's a Tuesday?
I'm going to check now. I'm going to checkity check.
Okay.
Where is my calendar?
And I also did some really interesting, I don't know, you've had Michelle Melendez on your channel. I was just with her at a conference. Make sure to check out The Death of Freedom. It's her book by Michelle Melendez, and you can get that on Amazon. And she really talks about a lot of the topics that I talk about. And The Death of Freedom is about the infiltration of the Catholic Church communist system on our society and how they've totally removed our rights. And I also met a really interesting young guy. I was at that fire event in the Palisades where we were documenting the stories of the people who had lost their homes and what has been happening to them, and how the government hasn't helped them, how the insurance companies haven't helped them, how their own city and county have not helped them at all. So we want to tell the stories. And I also found this really interesting book by one of the writers, and he's actually a Japanese young man who came to the event, and it's called Ancient Encounters and Modern Phenomena, the Unseen Forces Guiding Human History. And I directed him to your channel because I think he's going to be able to answer a lot of the questions that he asks in this book by listening to people like Lily, like a lot of us who are in the regular world. Yeah. Excuse me?
It's Beverly Roads. Beverly
Roads. Beverly. Oh, I thought it was Lily. Okay.
No, Beverly. Yeah.
Beverly, yes. Because that's giving us the unseen knowledge that we don't have and that we don't have regular access to. And again, just watching her shows have created a whole new avenues of research for me to come to the final conclusions that I want to make in my upcoming book. So thank you. Great. And thank you, Beverly. Yeah. I may have a few questions on her before I finish the book, just to clarify a few things.
I'll be having Michelle Melendez on again.
Okay.
She has been a guest before, and she will be coming on exactly talking about the book, The Death of Freedom. It might be good for you guys to check it out if you want to get it on Amazon in the meantime. because we will be discussing it on this channel. So thank you,
She also,
Simone.
I was going to say she also wrote the book, The Great Maui Land Grab. Was that the one? Okay, and that one's really going to explain a lot how they're using, because I think you guys have had the energy weaponry, the direct energy. You guys are having a lot of the same things happening there. And if you can document what's happening on your side of the world, and we can document what's happening over here, and then we can talk to all the people who are the survivors of these events, we can really see patterns, and we can try to help people to prevent it in the future.
Exactly. Yeah, as long as we can see what's happening, we read the language, we understand it, no problem. Okay, guys and girls, God bless you all. Take good care of your beautiful selves, and I will see you tomorrow for Double Trouble. But in the meantime, more double trouble. Just get up to trouble. It's fun. If this broke something open, if you recognized yourself in the testimony, if your body responded before your mind understood, the next step isn't more information. It's pattern work. Decode what your nervous system built to survive. Dismantle the story that keeps it running. Reorganize through the body and choose, actually choose, from the person you're becoming, not from the pattern that formed when you were too small to choose. That's Solutions. Link below. The body is the record. Let's listen.